Percy Cleghorn Stanley Hobart was not supposed to be part of the largest invasion in history. By the early years of the Second World War, he had been sidelined, humiliated, and effectively pushed out of the British Army he had served for decades. To many senior officers, Hobart was difficult, obsessive, and insubordinate. He argued too much. He challenged assumptions. He refused to accept that tradition mattered more than evidence. In an institution that valued hierarchy and conformity, those traits were enough to end a career. Yet when Allied forces crossed the English Channel in June 1944, it was Hobart's ideas, Hobart's machines, and Hobart's vision that made the invasion possible. The officer they demoted ended up shaping the outcome of D-Day. Hobart was born in 1885 into a military family, a background that almost guaranteed him a conventional career path. But from the beginning, he was unconventional. During the First World War, he served in the early days of armored warfare, when tanks were unreliable, misunderstood, and often dismissed as novelties. Hobart, however, saw their potential immediately. While many officers viewed tanks as support tools for infantry, Hobart believed they could become the centerpiece of modern warfare. He studied their mechanics, their tactical possibilities, and their limitations with obsessive focus. This made him valuable, but it also made him unpopular. After the war, as budgets were cut and armies downsized, Hobart continued to push for armored development. He wrote papers, conducted experiments, and trained units according to his own theories. He emphasized mobility, combined arms, and aggressive use of armor in ways that foreshadowed later successes in blitzkrieg warfare. Ironically, while Germany absorbed similar ideas and built them into doctrine, the British Army resisted. Many senior officers believed tanks were unreliable, vulnerable, and unsuitable for decisive operations. Hobart's insistence that they were wrong earned him a reputation as a troublemaker. By the late 1930s, Hobart had risen to command Britain's Mobile Division, one of the Army's few mechanized formations. In this role, he attempted to implement his theories in practice. Training was intense, demanding, and often unpopular. Hobart criticized officers openly when they failed to adapt. He bypassed traditional methods and wrote manuals. To those under him, he was brilliant but exhausting. To those above him, he was insubordinate. In 1939, as Europe moved toward war, the British Army chose conformity over innovation. Hobart was removed from his command. Officially, the reasons were framed as organizational reshuffling and personality conflicts. In reality, he had been sidelined because he refused to stop challenging orthodoxy. Shortly after the outbreak of war, he was effectively forced into retirement, at a moment when Britain desperately needed creative military thinkers. One of its most forward-looking officers was sent home. For Hobart, the demotion was devastating. He was 54 years old, unemployed, and watching the war unfold from the sidelines. When Britain suffered a series of early defeats, including the disastrous campaign in France, it became painfully clear that the Army's conservative approach had failed. Tanks had been used poorly, coordination was weak, and doctrine was outdated. Hobart watched as events validated everything he had warned about, yet no one asked for his advice. While Hobart was sidelined, another problem loomed larger with every passing year. Allied leaders knew that defeating Nazi Germany would eventually require an amphibious invasion of Western Europe. Such an operation would be unprecedented in scale. Tens of thousands of men, vehicles, and supplies would need to land on heavily defended beaches under fire. The logistical and engineering challenges were enormous. Standard tanks and equipment were not designed for this environment. Beaches were mined, blocked with obstacles, and covered by fortifications. Without specialized solutions, the invasion risked collapsing in the first hours. Early planning exposed a grim reality. Tanks would sink in soft sand. Vehicles would drown in surf. Engineers would be cut down while trying to clear obstacles by hand. The lessons of failed amphibious operations, such as the Dieppe raid in 1942, reinforced the danger. At Dieppe, Canadian forces had been slaughtered slaughtered on the beaches, unable to get armor inland. The disaster forced Allied planners to confront a harsh truth: without radically new equipment, any invasion would likely fail. It was at this point that Hobart's name resurfaced. Winston Churchill, who had long been more receptive to unconventional ideas than many generals, remembered Hobart's earlier work with armor. Churchill understood that the invasion would require innovation, not tradition. Against resistance from within the army, Hobart was recalled to service in 1942. He was not reinstated to a prestigious frontline command. Instead, he was given a strange, vaguely defined task: solve the technical problems of amphibious assault. Hobart approached the problem with the same intensity that had once gotten him demoted. He analyzed beach defenses, terrain, and enemy obstacles in detail. Rather than adapting existing equipment slightly, he proposed entirely new vehicles designed for specific tasks. These machines would land with the first waves and perform functions that normally required vulnerable infantry engineers. Many officers initially viewed the ideas as impractical or even ridiculous. Hobart proposed tanks that could swim, tanks that could lay bridges, tanks that could clear mines, tanks that could demolish concrete fortifications, and tanks that could cross ditches and seawalls. Each design addressed a specific obstacle that threatened the invasion. Individually, the concepts seemed eccentric. Collectively, they formed a coherent system for breaking through fortified beaches. These vehicles became known informally as Hobart's Funnies, a nickname that reflected both skepticism and begrudging admiration. Some senior officers laughed openly at the designs. The British Army had a long tradition of mockery toward unorthodox ideas, and Hobart's machines were certainly unorthodox. Tanks with flails spinning at the front to detonate mines looked absurd. Tanks carrying massive fastens to fill ditches seemed clumsy. Amphibious tanks fitted with canvas skirts were ridiculed as fragile and unreliable. Hobart did not argue emotionally. He tested everything. Prototypes were built, modified, broken, and rebuilt. Crews trained relentlessly under harsh conditions. Failures were documented and corrected. Hobart insisted on realism, forcing vehicles to operate in surf, mud, and under simulated fire. Slowly, evidence replaced skepticism. The machines worked, not perfectly, but well enough to solve problems no conventional equipment could address. By late 1943, as plans for Operation Overlord solidified, Hobart was placed in command of the 79th Armored Division. This unit was unlike any other in the Allied order of battle. It was not intended to fight as a conventional formation. Instead, it functioned as a specialized support force, its units attached to assault divisions as needed. Hobart personally oversaw training, integration, and deployment planning. Not all Allied commanders were convinced. The United States Army, in particular, was skeptical. American officers preferred standardized equipment and simpler doctrine. Some U.S. commanders declined to use Hobart's specialized vehicles, believing their own methods would suffice. This decision would have consequences on D-Day. On June 6, 1944, the invasion began. Thousands of ships crossed the Channel, and Allied forces landed on 5 beaches: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword, where Hobart's vehicles were used extensively. The results were dramatic. On British and Canadian beaches, specialized tanks cleared minefields, destroyed obstacles, and provided immediate armored support. Casualties were significantly lower than expected. Troops moved inland faster, and beach congestion was reduced. At Gold Beach, flail tanks detonated mines ahead of advancing infantry, saving countless lives. At Sword Beach, armored vehicles bridged obstacles and suppressed enemy positions. Amphibious tanks swam ashore and provided fire support almost immediately. The landings were still violent and chaotic, but they were manageable. At Omaha Beach, where American forces used far fewer specialized vehicles, the contrast was stark. Many amphibious tanks sank in rough seas. Infantry was pinned down by fire. Engineers struggled to clear obstacles under direct enemy fire. Casualties were horrific. Only extraordinary individual acts and improvisation prevented complete failure. Later analyses would highlight the absence of Hobart's Funnies as a critical factor. The success of the invasion did not hinge on any single individual. D-Day was the result of enormous collective effort. But without Hobart's contribution contributions, the cost would have been far higher, and the outcome far less certain. His vehicles transformed beaches from killing zones into breaches. They turned engineering tasks that would have taken hours under fire into operations completed in minutes. After the invasion, Hobart did not seek glory. He continued to command his division through the campaign in northwest Europe, adapting and refining equipment as new challenges emerged. His work influenced post-war armored and engineering doctrine, though full recognition came slowly. The British Army, once eager to sideline him, now quietly incorporated his ideas as standard practice. Hobart retired after the war, his career finally acknowledged but never celebrated in proportion to its impact. He was not a household name. There were no statues or grand memorials, yet historians and military professionals increasingly recognized his role as decisive. The invasion of Normandy succeeded not only because of courage and sacrifice, but because someone had anticipated the practical realities of combat and refused to accept inadequate solutions. The irony is unavoidable. The same qualities that led to Hobart's demotion is stubbornness, his refusal to compromise on technical truth, his impatience with tradition were exactly what made him indispensable. The British Army demoted him for being difficult. History vindicated him for being right. In the final analysis, Percy Hobart did not win the invasion by leading troops ashore or issuing dramatic orders under fire. He won it by solving problems before the first shot was fired. He understood that modern war was not just about bravery, but about preparation, engineering, and adaptation. The beaches of Normandy were conquered not only by men, but by machines designed by an officer who had once been told he did not belong. They demoted him. They sidelined him. They nearly wasted his ideas. And then, when the moment of truth arrived, they depended on them. The invasion that changed the course of the war bore the unmistakable imprint of Percy Hobart, the officer they demoted and the man who helped